Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel where we talk all things finance and investing. Today's video, we're going to do a bit of a deep dive into the recent 13F filing from Berkshire Hathaway, which is Warren Buffett's conglomerate company that he's controlling now for around 50 years, if you can believe it. It's always exciting when the 13F comes out for Berkshire Hathaway, captures loads of market attention because Warren Buffett is such a seasoned and successful investor for so long now. Big headlines this week, namely that Warren Buffett had sold out of 2 exchange-traded funds that track the S&P 500. I didn't even know he had funds that track the S&P 500 in his own portfolio, despite that being his main recommendation for investors like you or me. So let's get into it. The 13F filing for Berkshire Hathaway for the fourth quarter of 2024. Let's see what was going on and what this all means for investors and people like you and I. All right, so on my screen, I've gone to whalewisdom.com and gone into the 13F filing for Berkshire Hathaway. Now, if you're wondering what a 13F is, it's really just a form that professional investors, fund managers like Warren Buffett and many others, they need to complete. It helps provide transparency into the markets and what the actual pros are doing. And they do this on a quarterly basis. So the most recent release that we have is for the fourth quarter of 2024. Okay, but the 13F filing here on whalewisdom.com. So let's take a look into it. So we've got a bit of a summary here that just talks a little bit about Warren Buffett's company, as you can see up around here. But let's get into the actual chart. Now, what I've done here on this table is I've actually sorted this by change in number of shares. So as we can see, he has actually gone and sold 117 million shares of Bank of America. Now, to put that in money terms or monetary terms, the market value of that sale was around $29 billion. That is a significant move by Warren Buffett. He's been a big holder of Bank of America for a long time now, as well as some other banks. And he's always kind of loved banks throughout his time. But in this case, he's reduced Bank of America big time. He sold 46 million shares of Nubank, which is kind of an upstart finance company, bit of a fintech really that he had some association with based on some business partners in Brazil. He sold 40 million shares of Citibank, or Citigroup as it's known, and that was worth about $1 billion. So a much smaller sale, as you can see, from a much smaller position that he held overall. Okay, so those are the top 3 sales. He's done some other bits and pieces here, as you can see. So he sold some more of Capital One Financial as well, some communications, Charter Communications, for example, and a few other bits and pieces. But for the most part, he sold out of the banks. This is really interesting. Gut feel is, I don't know what he's thinking here. Perhaps that interest rates will not come up much further as they have done over the last few years, because banks tend to make more money as interest rates increase. And perhaps he's feeling that that's come to an end and he would like to reduce his exposure to banks. It could be more sinister than that. He might actually think that people are going to start defaulting on loans that they had from banks and it's going to hurt them. Remember, Warren Buffett controls businesses all across the spectrum in the US. So he has information week in and month out that the rest of us don't see. So maybe he's seeing something in there. Personally, I think it's done on a valuation basis and probably around interest rates for the motivations of selling the banks. But that's just my opinion. I don't know any more than anyone else when it comes to his decisions like this. But I want to scroll down a little bit because this has been the one that's talked about the most with clients and people in the markets from what I've found. If you look here, VOO is a ticker symbol for a Vanguard S&P 500 ETF. Very popular ETF. You know we like to talk ETFs here. I invest in an S&P 500 ETF, but this caught all the headlines. Warren Buffett actually sold 43,000 shares of VOO, and SPY, which is a similar ETF that tracks the S&P 500 listed in the US, he sold 39,400 shares of those. As you can see though, the market values on those was very negligible. It does say 0 in there. I actually looked up the numbers based on the share price of those at the end of the fourth quarter, and it's around $23 million each. So in total, around $46 million of sales in these 2 ETFs. Now, my thoughts on this. First of all, I didn't even know Warren Buffett owned any of this. And it may not even be his decision. Remember, he has two investors working for him, Ted and Tom, who control around $1 billion each, that they can manage however they want. So it's possible that it was them who own this. But the main takeaway here, because a lot of commentators are going to go with a very negative stance, Warren Buffett thinks the S&P 500 is overvalued, it's definitely time to sell. And that is a possibility. I did a video on this a few months ago. I'll put a link to the description on that, on Warren Buffett's cash pile. So have a look at that one. But let's be realistic. The size of that position of $48 million is absolutely tiny. It's around 0.01% of his overall portfolio. It's literally pocket change for him. So despite the media jumping on this, creating lots of fear for investors like us, in reality, it doesn't really mean anything. It's a bit of a rounding error in the Warren Buffett portfolio. So don't get too worried about that. Worth knowing, but don't get too worried about it. So that's his moves to the downside. Now, what did he do in terms of buying shares? I'm going to go start from the top here. Now, he's added to SiriusXM by 12 million shares, which is around 2.6 billion. He's added quite a lot to Oxy Petroleum. He's been doing this for a while. This is Warren Buffett style. He averages in over time, sometimes over years. He just doesn't lump everything in one go. Okay, and he's added around $13 billion of Oxy. This is where it gets interesting. Another headline that came out of the moves by Warren Buffett this week is on this one, STZ, which is Constellation Brands. This is a new position for Warren Buffett. He didn't have this in his portfolio before the fourth quarter of 2024. What do they do? Well, this is a huge company that sells mainly beer and alcohol throughout the US. Constellation Brands, big company, generates lots of cash flow, pays a dividend as well. But the most important thing to be aware of here is this company is sold off a lot because of the potential tariffs that would be coming in against Mexico, because they hold some of the bigger brands that are imported to the US from Mexico, like Corona and like Modelo, which has actually recently become the #1 selling beer in America, overtaking Bud Light. So what is Warren Buffett doing here? I mean, all the headlines, all the media, everything's screaming about tariffs, tariff wars, inflation, market's going to crash, all of this sort of stuff. Warren Buffett just goes about his business. And what he's done here, he's probably liked this company for quite some time, but just hasn't been able to get it at the price he wants. Up until now, that is. With the threat of tariffs coming in, this stock has sold off a little bit, come to the price level that no doubt Warren Buffett is like, and he's decided to start averaging in. And I wouldn't be surprised if in 3 months from now on the next quarter's 13F that we see him adding a little bit more to this position as well. He is a long-term investor. He's not thinking about what this company is going to do in the next year or 2 or even 5. He's thinking in 10 years from now, this company is probably going to be worth a lot more than it is today. And he was able to pick it up on the cheap because of all of the fear around the tariffs. Okay, and that is what a value investor does. So I'll be really curious next quarter to see what happens with Warren Buffett's 13F for Berkshire Hathaway. So I think the top 3 takeaways that we could have from Warren Buffett's recent 13F filing for Berkshire Hathaway is as follows. Number 1, he's not liking banks at the moment. He's clearly reducing his stakes in there. Pretty big league moves, that is. And there's something he's seeing that he doesn't like when it comes to financials. Number 2, when it comes to this reduction in his S&P 500 ETFs, it's really nothing. They're so small that it just doesn't matter. And number 3, he's added to Constellation Brands a new stock to his portfolio. But the main takeaway on this one that I think is very important is, even though the tariffs are dominating the headlines at the moment and people are getting awfully afraid of that, he's not fussed. He's thinking long term. And that is the mindset of a successful investor. Thinking long term and not getting too worried when the headlines are scary, as they are now. The truth is nobody really knows what impact these tariffs are going to have on inflation, on interest rates, and things like this. There's lots of speculation and lots of thoughts around this, but ultimately nobody truly knows if they'll even get enacted, and then what impact they may have on the stock market. The main area would be around inflation. If they're inflationary and they cause the Federal Reserve to increase interest rates, of course you're going to see the stock market sell off. Personally, in my own opinion, I'm not so sure that that's going to play out. And remember, Donald Trump uses the stock market as his ultimate key performance indicator. So would he tolerate a crashing stock market for very long? I don't think so. He may do for a little bit in order to do what he said he was going to do when he was elected. But let's watch this play out. By the way, I remember a story I could tell you personally of somebody I know. When Donald Trump was first elected in 2016, they decided, because of the fear and the fear-mongering around the media, around tariffs specifically, that person turned their retirement account into cash. And that was in 2016, shortly after he was elected. The S&P was trading around 2,000 at the time. Today, it's trading around 6,000. So that just goes to show the damage that can be done if you act too much on the media, on the scare stories, whatever they may be. So just bear that story in mind, because when it comes to selling your portfolio and go to cash, it's a massive decision. And frankly, I've never seen it work out for anybody. So that's my video on the Warren Buffett Berkshire Hathaway 13F filings for the fourth quarter of 2024. What do you think about the moves that he's made, selling of the VU and SPY, for example, adding Constellation Brands? Let me know in the comments. Let me know anything else that you would like to see. If you like the video, click on that like button. It would really help me. And subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. By the way, if you want a little bit more on Warren Buffett, why he's holding over $300 billion in cash, I did a video on that recently. Just click on this video up here. I'll see you over there. Great video for you to watch. And as always, I wish you all the best in your savings and investment journey.